$21,000 sounds like a lot of money for a motorcycle, but what you get is one of the most powerful bikes on the planet, super cheap to operate. All I pay is insurance. All my energy is free from sunlight, and I know where all the free chargers are in town. So I've literally paid $3 for energy.
I really got emotionally sucked in the first time I drove one and figured out that I actually like torque and horsepower more than most people rightfully should. Very fun to drive, cheap to own, quiet, smooth, clean.
Runs great, speed, oh man. I love torque on that car.
It's still paying for itself. It's wonderfully efficient. But beyond that, the car's just been fun and easy and quieter and better. But these are things that I picked up more after driving the car.
Clean energy doesn't cause sickness or illness in humans, doesn't kill people. Cars can drive on sunlight. I've been doing it since 2002. That's the main reason to do it, but there are a lot of benefits above and beyond that. You're going to save a lot of money because the fuel or the energy to power an electric car costs on order of about 20 to 30% that of gasoline.
My name is Chelsea Sexton. I am these days an advocate and consultant in the automotive world. I've been working on electric vehicles for about 25 years now, since starting on the General Motors EV1 program in the mid-90s.
My name is Paul Scott. I've been an activist for electric vehicles and clean energy for about 18 or 19 years now, ever since buying my first electric car and installing solar system on my house.
EV1 was one of several electric vehicles that were produced in response to a law in California that said basically if you want to sell cars in the state, if you're over a certain size automaker, you have to also offer some that are zero emission. So the 3 big American manufacturers and the 3 Japanese auto manufacturers all offered EVs at the time.
So Plug-in America formed out of the original group of us. There were about a dozen or so activists who were trying to keep the electric cars that we had because the industry was taking them back and crushing them.
So in response to that California law, most of the automakers got together and said, we don't really want to do EVs, that's not where our money is. And they ended up suing the state of California to water down the mandate and ultimately took the cars off, most of them took them off the road and crushed the cars. So as a result, some of the owners got together and some of the enthusiasts, and it led to protests and vigils and a funeral and eventually a documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car?
And they destroyed thousands of perfectly good electric cars that people wanted to buy. That's never happened before. So this group, we were protesting that, and we fought them, and Chris Payne ended up making this movie called Who Killed the Electric Car based on some of the work that we were doing, and he got all the other information from the industry for his movie. The group was originally formed to stop the crushing, the destruction of existing cars. But after we saved about 1,000 out of these 5,000 cars, then we decided, well, we need to do something else. You know, we can't just stop now. So we needed to encourage the auto industry to make more electric cars and at the same time educate the public as to the benefits of these electric cars. So we formed this group called Plug-in America, filed for a 501c3 status and got that. And Plug-in America is now probably the world's greatest organization promoting electric vehicles.
My first experience with electric cars started in 2008. I received an email from Mini USA to apply for their limited production trial program of the Mini E. I own 2 electrical vehicles now, 2014 Chevy Spark EV, which is 100% BEV, and also 2014 Cadillac ELR. It's the gussied up version of the first generation Chevy Volt.
I have a 2012 Nissan Leaf.
We've had it about 3 years, not quite 3 years.
I have a 2014 Tesla Model S.
So I have a 2017 Nissan Leaf SV, and this is the 3rd year. So we got it in 2017 February.
My name is Zachary Henkin. I'm the Deputy Director at Fourth, and Fourth is an innovative, mission-driven nonprofit that has a lot of work in the clean mobility space. So we spend a lot of our time educating consumers, working with cities, utilities, and other stakeholders to advance the use of clean transportation. The main types of electric cars are battery electric vehicles, or BEVs, PHEVs, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which used to be primarily the Prius and the Volt, and then also extended range electric vehicles, or EREVs, which is primarily like the BMW i3. With battery electric cars, there is only an electric motor and a battery. There's no gas engine. While with a plug-in hybrid, it's primarily driven by the gas engine and supported by battery. With an extended range electric car, what you have is a battery electric car, typically a smaller battery, but that's supported by a gas generator of some sort. So you have essentially that onboard range anxiety cure. A plug-in hybrid works by having a larger battery than typical of a normal hybrid. And then that battery, you're able to charge it at home via typical either 120 volt outlet charger or other charging station out in the wild.
The difference is with a hybrid, it has a gas engine.
You are having a combination of gas-powered vehicles as well as a battery that will actually help you by giving you an extended range.
You are always driven by gas primarily, and you're only getting that extra electricity into that battery if you're going downhill for a lot of time. You don't have a lot of direct control.
Over half of the people in the country, and heck about that many in California after 25 years, can't name a single EV. Think they kind of know what they are, assume a Prius is a full EV or a regular gasoline-only hybrid.
To me, the biggest benefits of having an all-electric is the lack of having to go to the gas station, lack of having to get tune-ups, lack of having to get transmission work done or whatever. It's the easiest maintenance car you could ever have. And if you don't want to have to deal with all that stuff, you know.
No gas, so no lines at the gas pump.
Faster compared to my previous car, so it was super nice to drive that, not to accelerate too hard to get moving.
Like, I haven't filled up the tank in probably 3 months now. I mean, that's amazing.
It's really easy to spin the tires on the Spark even though you don't intend to.
My favorite feature on the Tesla is the fact that I can go 0 to 60 in a very, very short amount of time.
And if there are no police and no red light runners, then I launch. Because I want everybody around that intersection to see this thing bolt across with no noise. And I know the conversations behind me are, what the hell was that? Did you see that? Because I'm literally half a block away and they're just taking their foot off the brake. Because I look in my mirror and they're not through the intersection, I'm at the next intersection.
Everyone has forgotten that smartphones are almost always worse at call quality and talk time than landlines. They don't do those two things as well for as long as they've been around, but they do so many other things better, we don't care. And EVs are closer to that. They do so many other things better, we don't care about the 2% thing. Okay, I can't tow a boat. Oh, so be it.
At the end of the day, electric cars are simply better cars. Like, at one point we moved from VHS tapes to DVDs, and we just said DVDs are better because of the resolution. Essentially, electric cars are better because they are more responsive, they're more efficient, and the total cost of ownership is much less. It's hard to pin on what is best, but generally the best technology from every OEM, it's going to the electric cars first, and so the whole package is better.
The biggest downside that I can think of when we were thinking of getting the car was the anxiety of the electric range.
Range anxiety is when folks do get worried about the fact that they are going to be stranded because the car is not going to have enough juice to be able to reach the destination.
Somewhat of a wake-up call of having to plan every trip with the vehicle. Being an engineer by training and also being analytical made it, I think, easier transition of having to plan your trip all the time.
Previously, we were used to a gas car, and so we knew we could always get it filled up whenever we want.
It certainly limited my options of where I can go with the vehicle. What I'm noticing is I'm limiting my trips, but also I'm selecting places where I can charge the vehicle easily as places to go.
Currently, we have 2 cars. We have a bigger vehicle, which is a gas vehicle. So for all our longer trips, we always go with that.
We also have a gas car for going up to the mountain and for when we need to fit 7 people.
Initially, we used to be careful about, if we had to go for long drives and if there was not a supercharger. As Tesla started to bring in the superchargers and the infrastructure started to grow across the West United States, it was easy. It was a no-brainer. We started to use the electric car more and more.
Most people don't drive more than 60, 70, 80 miles, certainly on a day, each day. And now all of even the smaller ones, have 200 miles. So how many people drive more than 200 miles in a day?
We're sitting in Los Angeles today, and we all think we drive really far because we sit in traffic all the time. So you might go 5 miles, but it still takes you an hour, and you feel like you must have gone 50 miles in that time to justify all that time in the car.
Generally, people enter into EV ownership with a lot of range anxiety, and after driving an EV for a while, that goes away.
We did not realize we drive so less on our daily basis until we got an electric car.
I think if GM decides somehow to use the Volt technology in the future, that would be the alternative. So if you don't have an all-electric car, having the electric car that takes you 60 or 70 miles, which most people, they don't drive more than that in one day, if they need to go more, then they've got the ability to go fill up.
People run out of gas in cars every day, and you certainly don't see as many electric cars stranded on the road, whether it's running out of charge or other mechanical problems.
I would say it's on me as a driver than necessarily the car. I generalize that there are people that will run out of gas and when driving a gas car, and there are people that will run out of electricity in electric cars.
I have yet to run out of charge on my electric cars.
No, come close.
So not really knowing what the real range of the vehicle would be as it gets to the lower state of charge for the battery. That was the only time where I had real range anxiety, and I think by the time I got home I still had between 5 miles to, I don't know, maybe 3 miles left.
But if I'm at the top of the hill, I allow it to go to 3 miles because I know I can just coast down and there's not a problem, and it'll charge as I'm coming down the hill.
And what happens in this case is as soon as you let your foot off the pedal, there is a regenerative braking that actually puts power back onto the batteries, which is a good thing because then you're actually conserving a lot of energy. You're using the energy from the braking to be able to transfer it back to the batteries.
Obviously the big change was the charging, kind of remembering to charge the car, right? And we would forget sometimes, but what also helps is that we are so much used to charging our iPhones on phones.
The first question I ask people when they're even looking at electric cars is that, how do you charge your phone? How often do you run out of charge on your smartphone?
If you had told me 10 or 15 years ago that I would need to charge my cell phone every day, it would have been ridiculous. So in a similar way, you plug your car in every day.
If they're constantly running out of charge on their cell phone, I say, think about your daily use of your car and what the vehicles offer for charging, because how people charge their phone reflects their personality and how they might charge their cars.
Fun stories you get while driving electric cars, because there's been at least 3 or 4 times when I've driven and gotten home and forgotten to plug in. And then I wake up in the morning and I have enough range to get to work. And I've luckily been able to depend on some form of workplace charging in order to get by, because then I'm able to drive to work, plug in at work, and I'm fine.
The ability to have front row parking, there's like 12 different spots, and it's totally free, and you just unplug it from the spot and then put it in and walk away.
The most important factor a person needs to consider when buying an EV is where they're going to charge.
That's an issue in apartment buildings.
In general, folks in single-family homes who have a garage, who have a charging station there, it's very simple. Even if you don't have a charging station and you're just plugging in a wall outlet, it's still very simple. If you have a home where you don't have a driveway and you're going to have to run an extension cord across the the sidewalk. It'd be good to think that through in advance.
We use the normal 120 volt. It's a slow trickle charge, and generally about 10 to 12 hours can get you back up to full charge.
So I'd say 99% of the time I charge my car at home.
I typically charge my car at home because that's all we need for our daily needs.
The vast majority of EV drivers charge up overnight at home, and their active time charging is the 3 seconds it takes to plug the car in, just like we do with our cell phones.
Going to a gas station, you have to go out of your way to a gas station. You have to wait for a pump. You have to get the pump. Who has held that pump?
Compared to that, having to rush out of the house 10 minutes early because you didn't feel like getting gas the night before, and now it's cold and kind of damp and you have an empty gas tank, versus, oh gosh, my car filled up while I was sleeping, and that basic tiny little experience is impactful to those who've had it.
The downside is that you don't have to go to a gas station anymore. How down is that?
I think I would have been on the cusp of being able to fully charge the car on a level 1 charger.
The first 2 months, I just had the regular plug and plugged it into the wall, and then I did get a charger, the 240 charger put into my garage, and it makes so much more sense to have that. So that's something I would definitely recommend.
So there's 3 primary ways of charging your car. There's level 1 charging, which is essentially the wall outlet in your home, 120 volts, 15 amps. There's level 2 charging, which is nearly the most ubiquitous level of charging, which is equivalent to a dryer outlet in your garage or a welder in your home. That's kind of a mid-level, but still pretty slow form of charging. And then there's fast charging, which has different ranges. And that's where you have the Tesla supercharger in the mix, but you also have CHAdeMO and CCS. For a typical car, you are looking at probably 20 to 40 minutes at a fast charger going from empty to full. So if you're on a road trip and you're pulling off, you can get coffee while your car is refilling. For like a level 2 station, you might be looking at 4 to 6 hours, where a level 1 charger, it would probably nearly always be overnight if you're empty.
Having the level 2 charger at home and being able to charge at least twice as quickly as you would with electrical outlet in the garage, it certainly gives you more flexibility of charging the vehicle and driving the vehicle on fully electric mode.
So what I have in my house is a 240 volt plug-in outlet. It'll create a 240 volt just like you would for like a dryer or a washer.
I also had a separate meter put in just for the car. So Southern California Edison has an electric vehicle rate if you have it on a separate meter, which I did.
The way Edison structures their electric car rates, there's 4 or 5 different programs you can have. You can have a separate meter, separate EV charging tier.
The cost to install was like $750 or $800. But I know that there were incentives that were paid directly to the installer that probably equaled $1,200 or $1,500 easily.
When getting into an electric car, people shouldn't notice much of a change in their electricity bill. There's a caveat there with, of course, the cost of electricity and where they're at. In some areas where you have tiered systems, you might run into higher costs.
Yes, a bit up, but I would say that it's not something which will shock me. It's like pretty reasonable, about like a 25% increase.
My electricity bill went up between $18 and $20 per month. I know exactly how much it is because I get a separate bill because I have a separate meter for the car.
If I do look at the offsets of what the electric bill increases versus the gas mileage and the amount of money I was paying for gas, it was nothing compared to that.
So the way public chargers and how they charge you, they do 2 ways. They either charge you an hourly fee or per kilowatt hour fee.
No question, we do need more infrastructure, especially in certain places, and it plays a really important psychological role at a minimum, and a marketing component.
In much of the country, there's virtually no charging infrastructure, none. My sister she lives in Indianapolis, and I gave her a used Leaf. To this day, it's the only one she sees, and there are virtually no public chargers in Indianapolis. It's a big city.
As EV adoption accelerates, we'll probably reach more attention along the way, especially at those highest utilized charging stations.
The ones that I see on a daily basis, there's always people waiting for these chargers.
At the end of the day, imagining a world where the majority of cars are electric, we simply need ubiquitous charging stations wherever we can get them.
And certainly that was why Tesla built out the supercharger network, which, if nothing else, proved the importance from that psychological and marketing standpoint, where a huge number of Tesla owners have said yes. Whether or not they used the network that much, knowing it was there was an important factor in their purchase decision.
There's pretty good level 2 infrastructure here, but we need to build it out more.
More of it is coming and faster now, so that should settle down a little bit. But at the same time, the vast majority of charging is done at home overnight, which was never possible for gasoline cars.
When I first got it, I could probably easily go 90 miles, maybe 100 miles, and it really depends on how you drive the car.
For my case, 2 years of ownership, and it has about 60,000 miles now. The usable range has dropped from the vehicle showing 100 miles of range after fully charged to right now about 90 miles of range.
Now, however, I've had the car 7 years, and it's depleted about a third. So instead of going 90 miles, I'm probably maxing out at 50 to 60 miles on a charge, which is really starting to create more range anxiety than I had at first.
I have not noticed a decrease in range. It's been 5 years, and our range has been around the 260 mile range, and it hasn't dropped.
There's a range with the battery itself based on ambient outside temperature, cold to hot. The distance is going to vary.
For one, battery costs, it's required by law that they're all guaranteed, I believe, for 8 years and 100,000 miles. Typically, they're pretty transparent in what those replacement costs are. I believe the Nissan Leaf, it's $4,000, so that if you are at the end of the battery's life, you can just go in and pay that. I lump it together as the expense of, as your engine goes out, what does that look like on the cost side?
It will decrease over time, but it's very slow and it's a very small amount. So let's say you have a 300-mile range Bolt, because a Bolt will go 300 miles. And so you're driving that car, and 5 years later, you're at 280 miles of range. So how big of a deal is that?
I believe there are studies to show that batteries do degrade quicker when you do your daily or weekly charging on level 3 chargers.
I've seen both sides of the argument that fast charging will degrade battery capacity. I think there's some truth to be said where if you are fast charging 10 times a day, you're going to hurt the battery. But that's might be as related to the heat as much as the flow and output of the electrons going into that battery chemistry.
You'll get up to 80% very quickly, and then it slows down to top it off, because there's a certain amount of heat generated when electricity has been put into a battery. And so to keep that from getting too much, as the battery gets full of energy, the temperature will go up. And so they back off on the current going into it to keep the battery from overheating. There are things you can do to make the battery last longer. Keep the state of charge, SOC, between 20 and 80%.
We usually don't even do that. We actually only keep the charge up to what Tesla recommends to be 60 to 80% of the charge, because that's what keeps the longevity of the battery. Even that in itself is enough mileage for the whole day.
If you take it all the way to zero, it's not going to hurt the battery, but you don't want to leave it empty, because that will, over time, cause harm. And if you charge it full, it's not going to hurt the battery, but you don't want to leave it full for like 2 weeks. The range diminishes, but the power and all the other characteristics are the same. It doesn't degrade.
The savings of switching to electric are pretty fantastic, but I think for me, what I found is it underscores how often disassociated we are with the cost of gas.
I don't know how much gas is at the gas station now, and I think at Costco I'm going to assume $3.50 a gallon.
Super cheap to operate. All I pay is insurance. All my energy is free from sunlight, and I know where all the free chargers are in town.
It's a good question of how much do you spend a month on gas? Because most people don't know. On average, folks are spending a couple $100s a month in gas. And so cutting that down to $10, $15, $20, $30 is fantastic. And that's where it gets really exciting when you could nearly justify yourself into a new car just by gas savings alone.
So I've literally paid $3 for energy on that bike, and that was it. And that's because I went way down to Laguna Beach for an art festival, and there was a charger there, but it was not a free charger. But $3, and I've got like 2,500 miles on it now, so that's pretty good.
Incentives for EVs is probably one of the best improving stories as we go along, because it's not just incentives for the cars, it's incentives also for charging. And it really depends on your locality. But here in Oregon, for instance, we have a state rebate, so you can have $2,500 off of the purchase of a new electric car.
The $7,500 federal tax rebate that you could get depending on the car you're buying.
Utilities often will also have an incentive, and sometimes that incentive is either for a car or for a charger.
And Southern California Edison, which is my utility provider, used to give $450 per electric car, whether it's new or used. They've increased that amount to $1,000.
And then depending on where you are, sometimes air quality districts do too. Typically a state will have a good website where you can have access to, like, this is my zip code, this is where I live, these are all the incentives that are available, and that way you don't miss anything.
If we hadn't had the tax incentives and tax credits, I would not have bought the car.
And the way GM does their leasing, I got a benefit from that as well.
The majority of people lease electric cars, partially because the technology is changing and you can buy into the car and have a lower monthly cost, and know that in 3 years, when technology is slightly improved, you'll be able to get into that next version.
We were still not sure about how the batteries will last and how much value would the car hold.
You know, I thought, okay, it's technology. Technology goes away in 3 years. I don't want to buy something like that.
In general, like an EV as a whole, in terms of technology, it's still kind of evolving.
And it has advanced quite a bit, even though the initial 2 or 3 years, it seemed to be slow.
But it's also an easier way to transact sometimes the incentives.
The way the tax credit is structured has really artificially influenced more leasing of EVs. So about 3/4 of the EVs in this country are leased, in large part because of the way the tax credit is structured, because it goes to the owner of the car. And so if you buy the car outright, or you finance it for that matter, the credit goes to you, but you gotta wait till your next taxes and apply for it.
If you get into a lease, you're only really negotiating that monthly cost, and it's fairly direct.
And because they wanna get their compliance credits, most of them will pass it through as basically a cap cost reduction or a down payment. So that's why we have the artificial, super cheap lease paying $99 a month. That's why.
I would recommend an electric vehicle to anybody who has access nightly to a charger.
I think it can be a good second commute car, like a family car, but that can be used for your daily driving.
If someone was looking for an electric car, I would try one. It's as simple as that. Pick a place where you can test drive one, whether it's a dealership or a friend, and just try it.
Try and get curious about what this technology is, try it out, talk to people who may have it, to be able to then think about it as a very viable and sustainable technology for the future.
One of the things that we have learned works best with consumers is giving them experiential opportunities. And that's test drive events in different places that aren't necessarily at a dealer. I mean, a lot of people are interested, but they want to try one out in a low pressure environment, and they don't want some salesman trying to check their credit before they get a test drive and all of that sort of thing. So things like National Drive Electric Week and test drive events elsewhere have been really helpful in just giving people opportunities, not just to see a variety of cars, but also to ride or drive and talk to real owners.
Look at the numbers that you have associated with your possible gas car that you might own. In a lot of cases, that's the rationalization, is looking at the gas savings, and that will get you into an EV.
For the folks who are driving electric vehicles, to be able to, take this and spread the word share it with people who have this, and talk to them about the data and the science, because that would also go a long ways in having people get rid of their anxiety, and the next time they think of buying another car, they'll look at this and say, wow, 400 miles, that's 300 miles, that's enough and plenty for me. I should go get one.
We would certainly be further along today if the automakers hadn't discontinued the programs of the 90s.
We need more, essentially, across all product classes. We need more all-electric SUVs, vehicles that can tow, vehicles that can be 7 passengers or more.
We also have less variety now than we had back then in terms of the types of vehicles. We had pickup trucks and things already back in the 90s.
If you wanted an electric pickup truck, you can look to like the Rivian.
To date, there's been more talk than action by certain companies, but yes, we should hopefully see and continue to ask for more variety. There's also an interesting phenomenon where this is the only example in the history of the automotive industry, if not all of retail products, where the consumer side has pulled the industry into it.
And so in much of America, they don't believe electric cars are viable at all. And that's the opposite of the truth, of reality. You're not having to drive a substandard car. The car you get that drives on electricity is better than any car you've ever driven. So there are no downsides to this, only upsides.
Hydrogen has long been promised by its proponents as the holy grail for all vehicles. And it's another zero-emission technology, and it may still have a place in certain vehicles. Generally speaking, the conversation has shifted a little bit over the years away from passenger vehicles for hydrogen and toward the larger buses and trucks. I don't personally expect a lot of penetration of hydrogen in passenger vehicles, but I know Toyota will insist all day long that that's exactly what will work in the end, and so we'll see.
It's an interesting question to see where the electric cars are going in the future.
EVs over the years have evolved in lots of ways, really in the progress of lots of other technology that's been marching along as well.
I think as costs of battery packs come down, maybe that will help to spur sales.
Electric cars still generally cost more. So there's a delta that we have to overcome, and usually that's met by tax incentives federally, or rebates or incentives otherwise at the state level. So things like that, better just programming so that our regeneration is more intuitive, are making these cars just incredibly efficient, and increasingly so. And I think that, combined with, frankly, safety, is making EV really interesting.
The degree to which other aspects and other technologies like automated vehicle features get folded into EVs remains to be seen. But it's co-enabling technology with EVs, but not codependent. So EVs can be more automated. Automated vehicles could be non-EVs, although that's probably not a good idea. But neither one is really dependent on the other one moving forward. So it's kind of a parallel path that most likely will come together.
The development over the years of the cars, the electric cars, have been phenomenal.
It's not strange to have an electric car. I think when I first bought my electric car in 2012, people looked, oh wow, there's an electric car, you know? And now, well, there's a million Teslas around here. And
I do think electric vehicles are ready for the mainstream. I absolutely do, and they should be.
We're certainly still in the early stages of EV adoption. I mean, nationwide, we're less than 2%.
Electric cars are coming along. It's fantastic to be seeing how we're moving from the tinkerers to adopters who are just simply buying a car because it's a better car.
We've been really pleased with the way things are going right now. It makes us feel really good that we've made that decision so many years ago, and we kind of have seen the advent of more and more vehicles and more companies now really buying into the technology.
It matters more to me that people come to the table of EVs. How they get there, which path they take, it matters less to me. It doesn't really matter in the end if you like it because it's clean, or it's fast, or it's cheap to drive. I mean, there's a ton of benefits, and so whichever one appeals is completely fine.
It becomes simply an option. Do I want a car that's more efficient, that's better for the environment, that has the latest technology? And if I'm not that type of buyer, then you're an EV buyer, and it's simply the fuel that's changing.
You're not having to drive a substandard car. The car you get that drives on electricity is better than any car you've ever driven.
If you are out there looking for, making a difference and playing your part in changing what the future is going to look like, it's not a monumental large step that you're taking, but it is a step in the right direction to be able to, think about, sustainable technology that you can use. And then also what that does is it sets an example for the future generations that you are, looking out for those generations and doing the right thing.